Good morning, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we are practicing the system of Reiki and growing gardens at the intersection of self-reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. My name is Michaela, and I'm really contented this morning to welcome you back to my garden for a little in the garden video. Well, it is a lovely day. It is the second day of June, which means here in Central California, in Davis, California, we are in full swing gardening season. And I was just puttering around out here as the heat is starting to rise, and I got to thinking that it might be about time to share a garden tour with you. I've talked a lot about different aspects of the garden, different ways in which my interaction with the garden interacts with my Reiki practice, and we'll be doing a lot more of that. But I realize I've never just walked you through the whole thing and just shared with you some of the projects I'm working on, the experiments I'm in the middle of, failures that have happened. And I just thought I would share that with you this morning. Felt like a good way to spend my time. I am going to split this up into two videos. This morning I'll share with you the front yard garden, and in the next round I'll share the backyard garden with you. Two different spaces, and that just feels a little easier to manage. So yeah, let's take a walk through my garden. So I wanted to begin by just sharing the view of my garden in the front patio from my sit-in bench. I'm just gonna pan you around. Bike parking space and all. As you can see, this little patio garden is just tucked off to the side of my driveway. Just a typical old suburban lot. And this little patio was pretty barren. I pretty much didn't use it much at all for quite a few years. And, you know, one of the many responses that my nervous system had when COVID came into our lives 2 years ago was to begin to feel really urgent about returning to the garden. And so building this space on this patio, oh, look at that lovely friend. I mean, just look at her. She's so gorgeous. These orange butterflies, I cannot remember their name. I looked them up recently, but they breed on the passion flower vines back on that fence, and they're just stunning. They're just everywhere right now. Anyway, building this patio garden was one of the first things that I did. It just really settled my nervous system, gave me a place to focus my energy on something that felt generative, something that felt useful, something that felt healthy in the midst of so much challenge. And it's been a really joyful experience with a lot of success and a lot of failure. So let's take a little bit of a walk around. So the lighting is actually terrible to be doing this video this time of day. The sun's getting real high, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of a different view of this spot. Let me actually shift that a bit. Okay, so this is coming into the front patio. As you can see, I've got raised beds built with this corrugated metal and lumber framing. This front bed here has some roses and some rogue hollyhocks that are looking ridiculous at the moment. But I felt this really strong urge to have this border of roses here. And as you can see, they're struggling. Look at this one. These are all David Austin roses, and they're a little bit fussy. And it's my first time growing roses. One thing that I realized is that if you're going to make a hugelkultur bed, which all of these are, I'll explain what that means in a minute. A hugelkultur bed is going to settle quite a bit in its first year or two. So as you can see, the soil level in this bed has gone down, gosh, almost a foot. And I think that's really not benefited these roses. So I'm going to be actually pulling these out this fall and resettling the soil level and replanting them, or perhaps planting a hardier version. So let's come around. There's the front door of the house. This little arbor, which hopefully eventually will be covered in roses. And coming in here, we see 3 more of these beds. So one here, one over there, and one way in the corner that we'll go take a look at. And then all along the outside here. Pardon my pile of tools there. We've got really a somewhat random assortment of plants. I would call my gardening style haphazard. I kind of put things where I feel like they want to go and fill holes as they appear and see how things work, and a lot of things don't work and then I try again. But here are some successes here, including this absolutely stunning dahlia. Can you stand it? I just love these dahlias. And I planted these 2 different dahlias last year. One of them died fairly promptly, but this one did okay. But I was so thrilled to see her come back this year, and it looks like she's gonna bloom quite a bit. And again, some more hollyhocks, these lovely little red beauties here tucked in behind this crepe myrtle tree, and another tiny little rose that is going to give me a few more yellow blossoms pretty soon. These snapdragons just absolutely were glorious in the early spring, and they've died back. I'm letting them go to seed. I'm letting them drop as much seed as possible. I'm saving seed because I just love them. So to me, it's worth letting them look kind of a mess for a while in order to let them go through their seeding cycle, so I can save that. There's another dahlia that I just planted this morning because I'm now officially in love with dahlias, and hopefully she will do as well as her friend that just came back. While I'm down here, I'll point out, well, the random tomato. Tomatoes are tucked absolutely everywhere in this garden because, you know, tomato addiction is a real thing. But what I really wanted to point out was the passion flower vines, and they are just popping up everywhere, and they are growing onto this trellis, and they are attracting these gorgeous orange butterflies. I will have to look up the name of that butterfly and put them in the show notes. And I'm training them across this walkway to this archway. But these particular passion flowers, this is Passiflora incarnata, which is the variety of passion flower that one uses for medicinal use. So you harvest the flower, dry it, and use it in teas. It's a nervine, a relaxer. I use it in a nighttime sleep tea. It's really lovely. And just really wanted to see if I could grow them here. This is their second year here. They did die back just about completely over the winter, which was a bit unexpected because in the backyard, when we take that tour, I'll show you the Passiflora edulis that are growing on an arbor back there, just absolutely thriving. Did not die back at all over the winter, stayed green. And now is just absolutely packed with fruit. That's the variety that produces edible fruit. So just an interesting observation in the differences of varieties. There are dozens and dozens of varieties of Passiflora, and so these are just the 2 that I'm trying out now. Obviously the incarnata is a bit more frost sensitive, but she came back strong this year, and hopefully will continue to. All right, let's carry on. So I wanted to come down here and point out these sunflowers, which are not yet flowers, but just tiny little plants. These are from a grower named Sunflower Steve. I cannot remember his last name right now, but he just goes by Sunflower Steve. And this is a variety that he developed over the last 10 years called Van Gogh's Fantasy. And they are a multi-layered, in terms of the petals, multicolored form of sunflower. They're absolutely stunning, and there is just nothing like them on the market. They have just become available for gardeners such as us, hobby gardeners, backyard gardeners, to purchase. He made them available as a fundraiser this year, and next year I believe he's going to start selling them you know, as an available seed. I will be showing you what these look like when they flower. I've got them planted in several different places. They are going to be stunning. And I will put a link to Sunflower Steve down below if you want to check it out yourself. As you can see here, more of the Passiflora, much more dense on this side, thriving much more on this side of the fence for whatever reason. And then another random plant, random lemon cucumber. just tucked in here amongst the vines, doing pretty well. Although I am having a situation with pill bugs this year. Look at that. Look at these guys. They're just, look at them. They're just everywhere, these guys. Not the only one. I've heard a lot of gardeners in my area talk about the pill bugs being a little out of control this year. As you can see on the other side of the fence, there's pots of raspberries. This is my first year growing raspberries. I need to get some irrigation out there. It's hard to keep them watered enough through the fence. But you can see there's 4 pots. There's actually 2 raspberries and 2 blackberries. I think this is a blackberry. Hopefully we can get those going. Oh, hello. Hello, little friend. Little random coleus in a pot here. This tomato is a Carbone variety, seeds from Baker Creek heirloom seed. You can see I have it growing in a pot. I don't love growing tomatoes in pots. I don't have a lot of success that way. But this one is doing really well. In fact, this variety, the Carbone, I planted about 20 different tomato varieties this year. And this one was the first to germinate, the highest germination rate. And so far of the tomatoes in my garden is among the ones that's thriving the most, particularly given the fact that it's in this pot. And again, I haven't had a ton of luck growing tomatoes in pots. So I'm very pleased with that variety. I will be growing it again next year for sure. So coming around here, we have this corner bed. And I actually built this one very recently. I kind of studied the design of the ones that were here that I purchased from a local builder, and went ahead and built this corner piece specifically so that I could do some more trellised tomatoes. I don't have many spaces on my property that have enough sun for tomatoes and that also have a good space for creating support for them, trellising systems for them. So I really wanted to put tomatoes in this corner of the yard because it gets really good sun throughout the day, but then it's shady in the afternoon, which is ideal in our extremely hot, extremely sunny situation. So these tomatoes are starting to take off because I was building this bed and it took me a little longer than I hoped. These tomatoes all stayed in their pots just way longer than they should have, but they're doing pretty well. They're starting to really bounce back, and I think they're going to be great. There's a bunch of different varieties here. I am terrible about labeling things. I endeavoring to be better about that, but I only have vague recollections about what everything is. But I believe this is a large red cherry. This one was labeled Carbone also, but it's looking real different from the other one over there. So I think it might have been mislabeled. I think this is actually a cherry tomato of some sort. That one is a Napa Chardonnay cherry, I believe. This is a Black Beauty, and this is one that a neighbor gave me, also a black tomato. I do not remember the variety. So then shifting over here, this pot here, this tends to be my experiment pot. I'll put something that I'm trying out for the first time in this pot. Last year I tried turmeric and it did okay. It wasn't fantastic. I am going to try again, but I decided not to try again this year. Pull some garbage out of there. But what I'm trying in here this year is Job's Tears, which is a form of cereal grain, edible grain, kind of in the old world grains category. But it also, and what I'm growing it for, obviously this is not nearly enough plants to create any sort of robust amount of cereal grain. But what I'm growing them for is beads. They're used also traditionally as beads for jewelry making because they grow on, these will grow a nice stalk and the seeds will grow along that stalk. And when they dry, you pull them off the stalk and they have a hole in the center of the seed just naturally there. So obviously a great benefit for creating beads that you don't have to drill a hole in. And they're beautiful. They're very beautiful, luminous, kind of in blues and pinks, good size seed. So I am really excited about that. They're doing really well. I really hope that I get a decent chunk of those. I have another little crop of them here and here that there wasn't room for in that other pot. So hopefully that will do well. This is a lily of some sort that I don't remember. I think somebody gave me that one. So moving on to this bed, we have some eggplants in here. They are doing really well. These are all Thai eggplants, so they will grow long, narrow, purple fruits. Those are my favorite eggplants to work with, although last year I did find some ways of cooking with the larger Italian eggplants that I liked. I've traditionally not liked those a ton. Oh my goodness, friends, look at those butterflies. I can't stand it. I just have to show you every time they catch my attention. They're just so amazing. Oh, they're fluttering around a cocoon that maybe just opened. I don't know. They're like super excited about whatever is going on with that cocoon hanging off that pot. All right, I'll have to investigate that in a minute. But back to eggplants. So yeah, these are doing really well, but obviously also took a beating from these stinking pill bugs. I actually lost 2 plants in this bed to pill bugs when they were tiny plants. Had to do some pill bug remediation, trapped a bunch of them, got it under control, but their numbers are definitely coming back. They just like to just hang out on my plants, eating them. But these are doing all right. Got a couple of little random basil plants in here. And then one of my favorite tomatoes, a Brad's Atomic Grape. This grows these really lovely striped tomatoes. They're not ripe right now, so you can see that they're striped, but when they're ripe, they will be kind of reds and yellows and purples. Really pretty, and they have a very distinctive, very tangy, almost yeasty flavor. They're very, very odd tomato, and people tend to either really like them or really not like them. So I really like them. But as you can see, this one is doing real well, growing on this little tiny arch trellis. This is not an ideal size for an arch trellis. As you can see, they don't have a whole lot of room to grow. They're already to the top of this trellis. I'm going to try to train them up and over it. We'll see how well that works. But, you know, it's a small space. I got to do what I can. And my gardening style tends to include cramming things in and then hoping for the best. On this side, similar situation, tomato trellised here. This one is a Napa Chardonnay, little yellow cherry tomatoes, grown, developed just on the other side of the mountains for me in Napa, California, and also doing really well. This is one of those beds that I really probably overdid it with cramming things in here. This is actually a completely separate tomato, a determinate variety, although it does seem to be spreading more than a determinate normally would. But these are called Beta Lux. They are a seed also from Baker Creek, and they make a kind of smallish, not quite a cherry tomato size, but smallish tomato. And then tucked in here, we've got some more basil. We've got the rest of the carrots from the fall that I need to pull out. I don't have a ton of luck with carrots, but we did get a few, and we'll get a few more good ones from this batch. Some collard greens, or this might be kale left over from the fall, I'm not sure. I've just been slowly removing the chard, the kale, the collards as they start to bolt, and then just feeding them to my rabbits or eating them or whatever. But my daughter has a bearded dragon who needs regular greens, and so I'm just keeping these going, at least a few plants, so that little Tony the dragon always has his greens available. This side, I lost some plants on this side, didn't get good germination. Here's another one of those Beta Lux tomatoes that's not doing as well as the other. It's just smaller. So this side is taking its time to fill up. Just planted some cosmos here, some more basil, one more eggplant. This is a type of greens, again from Baker Creek Heirloom Seed. I cannot remember the full name. The first part of it is chiji, so I just call it chiji. But it's a type of green similar to spinach that's supposed to do much better in the heat, tolerate more heat, not bolt immediately. And because we are in a very hot region that gets hot quickly, thought I'd give that a try. I really enjoyed this, eating this over the winter, and just planted some more, and hopefully it'll do well. So that is the patio garden. Just take another sweep here. Very condensed little space here. And now I'm going to take you on the other side of that fence to the front yard garden, which is both abundant and amazing and also just a hot mess right now. So let's go take a look. So, full disclosure, one of the reasons that I have delayed in shooting this garden tour is that I kept wanting to, clean up first so that I didn't have to show you a hot mess. But, it just didn't happen, and it's probably not going to happen for a while. So here we are. We're just going to take it as it is and appreciate it for the transitional space that it is. So I'm going to flip you around here. Okay, so we're standing here at the street view. It's my little suburban street, the corner of the yard here. And you'll see this wide open mulchy spot with piles of logs. Our city tree was here. It was taken out recently. A lot of the city trees in my neighborhood have been dying over the last few years, and it's really sad and depressing, but also dangerous because they're dropping huge branches. And so this was taken out, and the city will be putting back another tree eventually. Keeps getting pushed back. At this point, it's probably not going to be until the fall, but that's why this area is kept open. And the pile of logs here is a future bench. As you can see, this is the front support, this beautiful manzanita piece, and these two logs that I found at the creek. So that front piece has been put together, the back piece is almost together, and then it's going to be installed over on the other side. We'll go take a look in a second. But first, this little pomegranate tree right here, she actually volunteered there. I get volunteer trees all the time. In fact, there's another little oak. We're always getting oaks planted by the squirrels. But this pomegranate was planted by probably also squirrels, and probably from seeds from the pomegranate in the back that I'll show you in the other video. And it just kind of was coming up in a place that actually was okay for a little tree to grow, and she's just thriving without really any care at all. I need to go in and do some pruning, but I just, it made no sense to take that out. So little pomegranate blessing that came through nature there. And then this situation here, as you can see, we have pumpkin vines. There's some melons hiding in there. There's a big old zucchini, and then there's tomatoes along the back. This bed, honestly, was a spontaneous development because I absolutely could not stand the fact that I have not been able to grow pumpkins. This is the only spot where there is enough sun and space kind of for them to sprawl. You can see here, this is a Tokyo Blue pumpkin. There's a couple of red curry squash in here that I believe, oh yeah, there's a little baby right in there. But this bed, I don't know if you can see it, it's a big straw mound. It's one of what will ultimately be probably three. It'll probably run here and then along the front, along the street, to about where the city tree is, and then jog back up here to the pomegranate. So the pomegranate will kind of be the focal point in kind of a triangular space. But this was built using hugelkultur methods, and I mentioned that when we were looking at the other beds, and I promised I would circle back to what that means. So what hugelkultur is a form of permaculture design that mimics the way that nature builds soil and grows plants. Let me see if I can get in here. So as you can see, there's a bunch of straw here. Underneath the straw is, of course, soil. Underneath that soil was stacks of brush just harvested from, clearing out different trees and plants. And under that is like a pit that I dug here, a trench that I filled with logs. If you can imagine the forest floor and how the forest builds soil, a tree falls or it drops a large branch, settles in the ground, leaves and sticks and other brush fall on top of that. Dirt and dust get kicked around by animals. Eventually those smaller pieces on top of the log break down quickly into soil, and you get a layer of topsoil over that log. Meanwhile, that log is slowly decomposing, is slowly turning back into soil and compost. And as it's doing so, it's doing a few things for the soil above. Firstly, it's blending with the green material, the nitrogen-rich green material that's fallen on top, and the nitrogen-rich material plus the carbon-rich material in the log, slowly blending to make that rich balance of soil. But it's also significantly holding water. It becomes like a sponge, retaining water below the level of the soil. And that's extremely important here where we live with chronic drought. This is a kind of desertous Mediterranean climate. We don't get really any rainfall at all after winter. Pretty much we get all of our rain in the winter, and it's very, very dry. So creating gardening situations that naturally retain water and build soil is hugely beneficial. So all of the raised beds that we just looked at on the patio were built that way, with logs on the bottom, then fresh brush trimmed off of different plants, then some raw compost that hadn't fully decomposed yet, just from my bin, and then fresh soil and compost in the final 8 to 12 inches to plant in. As I mentioned with that rose bed that was looking so raggedy, because of all of that material that is not yet turned into soil, it settles quite a bit. As those things condense and the air pockets get squished and they start to decompose, the soil level comes down significantly. And so, big learning for me this year is when you make a hugelkultur bed, don't plant perennials in it immediately, especially if it's in one of those raised beds, because the soil level will settle and then you can't backfill the soil again because your perennials are there. So again, I've kind of created a situation where I'm going to have to pull out those roses, reset the soil, and then replant roses. Not a big deal. Good learning, But in this space, the tomatoes and pumpkins, of course, will be done by the end of the season. And then over... Sorry, a big old Amazon truck just drove by. Over the winter, I will lay more compost. I'll, pull compost from the rabbit bin, and we'll just, reset this, build the other 2 beds that I described, and then come spring, this will be in great shape to plant again. But I'm very pleased with it. As you could see, the pumpkins are growing really well. Putting the tomatoes in the back was a little bit of a last minute decision because I had so many tomatoes left over from my plant sale. And again, some learning moments around that. Let me take you around the back here and I'll show you what I mean. Hold on. So here's another view of it from the street side, starting with that zucchini. A few little random peppers I tucked in there. Not sure how well they're going to do, but again, they were left over. They needed a home. So as you can see, I put this standing trellis here, just some welded wire with some T-posts. And because there's this kind of weird concrete border that is underneath all this mulch from the original design of the garden, I couldn't put these T-posts right up against where the tomatoes are. And that, and I plan to just kind of guide them with these with these sticks over to the trellis so that I could attach them to the trellis. And that is not working out fantastically because they really want to grow in the direction of the eastern sun, which is that way, away from the trellis. And so it's been a challenge to get them to come up. I don't know, it's hard to see from this angle, but a lot of them are just kind of growing basically away from the trellis. So I'm having to constantly tie them back and pull them back. And of course, because there's all this squash here, it's really hard to do that. It's hard to get to them. And I used a welded wire that has really small holes, so it's hard to reach my arms through. So not ideal, but the plants are thriving. There's tons of baby tomatoes on them already. I think ultimately it's going to be fine. It's just not ideal way to trellis your tomatoes. And I will do it differently next time. So then on the other side of that bed, we have this little spot here, which is really looking a mess after a recent windstorm. But what we have here, this is actually the first part of this front yard that I started to develop. This front yard, this is just embarrassing to admit, this front yard for years was just a weedy mess. It was like, I feel like I was the embarrassment of my neighborhood. It was just a weedy mess. I, finally mulched it really deeply, took care of the weed situation, at least for now. And the first things I put in were these 2 elderberries. So the one on the back I got from a local nursery. It's a black elderberry. And this one here was grown from seed, or maybe from cuttings from a local elderberry tree. We have quite a few natural elderberries that grow in this region. And I, every year, go and harvest elderberries and flowers from them along the creek, and use them quite a bit in medicines. And so I definitely wanted to have some elder growing here. Two things are causing them to look really a mess right now. One, I mentioned a windstorm, that, you know, they grow in these kind of canes. They're really more of a bush than a tree. So a lot of those got knocked over. But it also suffered from this leaf curl disease as a result of a bit of a mite infestation that happened over the winter. And so my local garden expert assured me that she'll recover just fine, and actually I can see, now that I'm up close, new growth coming. So I think what I need to do now that there are new branches growing is come through here and cut off these old branches that have the damage, and let the new ones come through. I'm really pleased to see this new growth. I hadn't noticed this. Yeah, it's coming out everywhere. Okay, that makes me feel really happy to see that it's recovering. So as you can see, there's two of them, and then there's this gap in between. And this is where that bench is going to go. The bench that we looked at the beginnings of, it's going to go right here between these two elderberry. And I'm going to train the elder to grow over the bench. The bench will have a trellis on either side and a canopy over top, and it will it'll support these trees so that they don't just sprawl like they're doing right now. This stump that I'm standing on, by the way, this is the stump of a redwood tree that was here when I moved in, and it was truly in bad shape when we moved in. Redwoods are native to the coast, not to the inland valley. They are absolutely ill-equipped to deal with our heat, with our dry, long, hot summer. They are coastal trees. They are used to having sea spray and, you know, cool temperatures, and they absolutely do not thrive in this area. And yet a lot of people have planted them because redwoods are amazing and wonderful. But unfortunately, a lot of the older growth redwoods, as we get more and more into more chronic drought, as global warming takes its toll, are really just dying all over town. And so this redwood had to come out when we first moved here. I keep the stump in memoriam, and I'm thinking about putting a beehive here, actually. I have a lot of bee plans we'll talk about in another time. But at any rate, that bench will go here between the two elderberries. And then this little corner, let me turn you around again. So you can see it's full of straw. This was my first mushroom experiment. I put wine cap mushroom spore back here, but because I don't have irrigation out here, I just could not keep it moist enough. It actually gets more direct sun than I thought that it does in this corner, at least until these elderberries grow in, and is just too hot and dry and sunny a spot, as it turns out, for mushrooms to thrive. So I'm figuring out what I'm going to do here. I might plant some wild roses actually in this corner, now that I think about it. I have some wild rose plants that I started from seed that need a home. So hey, there's a good idea. Anyway, coming through the two elderberries and back over to this other side, you can see those 4 barrels of raspberries and blackberries that are on this side of the fence. We have some yard crews going in the back. That is probably my cue that I should bring this to a close. Friends, look at this. Look at this pumpkin plant just growing all up in the pomegranate. I just noticed this. This just... And there's my friends Leaf and Kirsten walking the dog. So yeah, that pumpkin just grew in there in the last couple of days. That was not like that the last time I was out here, so I'm gonna have to disentangle her from the tree. Anyway, lastly, we'll just come over here and just pay our respects to the last 2 plants on this side, which is this little grape vine here. This is a really dark red grape that is kind of dual purpose. It can be used for fresh eating or for stewing into jams and jellies and such. And then this lovely little lavender plant with this industrious carpenter bee. You can see him. This lavender plant my daughter picked out from the farmer's market last year, and she did not do very well at all last year. I thought she was dead a couple of times, but she came back and is looking real good. And so she's now the welcoming committee here, beginning the tour here, actually. All right, so there's part one of my garden tour, the front yard and the patio garden. Next time I will show you the back, and back there we have the beehives, the chickens, the rabbits. I've showed you a bit of that in other videos. That's where I've done most of my videos, so I just wanted to start up here and show you this space. That bench that we started at, where I showed you the view from that bench, that is absolutely one of my happy spots. I sit there almost every night after dark and after my kids gone to bed and just think and sit in the coolness and sit with the garden and let my mind wander. And it's really a place of restoration for me. It's a place of contemplation, a place where I get to kind of let things go, let things process, be in, whatever practice I need to be in for the day. And so I'm really glad that I got a chance to share it with you. I would love to hear how your garden is growing. I'd love to hear how you relate to your garden, what your garden means to you in terms of your well-being, your health, your spiritual practice. The intersections of these things are of great importance to me. So I'd love to hear how your garden is growing and how your heart is growing in response. Until then, I hope you have a beautiful day, and I hope that you are deeply provisioned for whatever journey you might be on in this moment. Until next video, I love you so much. Bye-bye.